What is going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 20 of Let's Be Frank with your host, your friendly neighborhood bull, Frank Mattis, brought to you by the Old City Sports Network. And Happy New Year to everybody out there. I hope everybody had a great holiday. I certainly did. Spend time with friends, family. I won a fantasy championship. So, a lot of good things happened this holiday. I was recharged. I feel great. And I'm ready to attack the new year. A lot of big things are on the horizon for not just myself, but for the network of Old City Sports. I really think that by year's end of 2025, Old City Sports can be the premier network for all your Philly sports needs. So I feel like this is a really big year coming up for not just myself, but uh, for Old City Sports. I really believe in this company, in this network, and I think we're going to do some big things in 2025. So the best is yet to come. Uh, that's for sure. On the docket today, I will talk about the Eagles. I'm not going to get too deep into their win against the Cowboys. There's really nothing to review. They just took advantage of an inferior team. So there's really not much to say there. Obviously, we got word that Saquon Barkley will not chase the record of Eric Dickerson, and the Pro Bowl rosters were just revealed. So I will get into that. I will also talk about the college football playoff, some interesting outcomes, some good games finally from the college football playoff, and I'll also talk about the Sixers and where I see things going forward. So let's talk about the Eagles again. They took care of business against an inferior opponent in the Dallas Cowboys. They did sweep them. First time they swept them since 2011, so that's good. Granted, it's a little ho-hum because they didn't get to go up against Dak and CD and them at full strength, which would have made the sweep more satisfying, obviously. But a sweep against the Cowboys is still great, and we hadn't done that in quite some time. So kudos to the Eagles for doing that. There really wasn't much to take from it. The game, that is, they just pretty much imposed their will on an inferior opponent. Saquon Barkley ran wild for 167 yards, got himself to the 2,000 mark. He's at 205 now. And a lot of us were really hoping to see him break the record at home against the New York Giants, his former team. To me, not only was the record attainable and something that um, Eagles fans wanted to see, not just for Barkley, but for the organization, something that the organization can hang their hat on, having that record to their name, but also going up against the New York Giants and the poetic justice of getting the record against your former team. I mean, it just would have been, you know, chef's kiss, so to speak. So yeah, I'm a little disappointed that he's not playing. I listen. I get the argument. You want these guys rested for the playoffs. This really is a meaningless game. There's no way for them to get the one seed. Um, and you want to win championships more than records. I get that, but goddamn, this is really attainable. This record's so attainable, given uh, how Saquon's been playing, given the inferior opponent that is the New York Giants, who made a huge mistake beating the Indianapolis Colts last week. I don't know why they decided to decide to play the game of their lives, but yeah, man, they kind of ruined their chances of getting the one seed. Actually, not the one seed, the first overall pick. Um, to me, I think that they probably read into that like, oh, we just kind of ruined our chances. Let's not go for it. Let's not hurt our draft stock. There could be that going on within their organization. So to me, I think that this record was very attainable. I would have gone for it. I think that you wouldn't have had to do it in 4 quarters. I think you could probably do it in 3, maybe even 2. So I'm a little disappointed that they didn't decide to go with Saquon Barkley. But again, I get the argument against it. You want him healthy. You want to win championships over records. I get that. But it's right there. You know what I mean? It's right there. It's attainable. And the whole going up against your former team aspect is poetic justice. And to me, that's something that we would all like to see. Personally, I also would have liked to seen Jalen Hurts play. Obviously, he hasn't been cleared through the concussion protocol. So, you have to navigate through that. But I like I've said all year long, I do believe in Jalen Hurts. I do believe he's an elite quarterback. But the fact that he hasn't thrown for 3K is not the greatest look. Now, granted, context does matter. He did miss the last couple games, so that's what ultimately prevented him from getting that. He would have easily gotten it if he didn't get hurt. Passing numbers have been down throughout the league across the board. But a lot of the anti Jalen Hurts people will most likely point that out. Oh, we didn't throw for 3K, and it isn't the best look for an elite quarterback to not throw for 3K. Uh, you know, Maybe it's an OCD thing for me. I would have liked to see him get it, but not just that. Jalen Hurts to me, you want to see him, kind of get his feet, wet again and get some momentum for the playoffs and to make sure that he's not cold going into their first playoff game. So I would have liked to seen that on top of him getting the 3K. To me, that I mean, at the end of the day, him getting more or him getting back into the swing of things more so than the 3K mark. Uh, it was important or is important, I should say, but it isn't. It's not the end of the world. So I get it. And obviously, if he's not cleared, then there's nothing you can do. So you can't even play him. So, um, listen, I'm at peace with what they're doing. I really would have liked to seen Saquon Barkley break the record. I think it's very attainable for him to do it. But ultimately, this is it's not about individual records. It's about team accomplishments, and the ultimate team accomplishment is Super Bowl. And I think that this team can do it. So this better end in the Super Bowl. I'll just say that. I think that it's right there. It's right there in front of them. The Lions, to me, are really banged up defensively. I mean, if you watch the game on Monday night, I mean, Brock Purdy looked like Joe Montana those first three quarters. I mean, he absolutely carved that defense up, and I think that's going to hurt them going against the Vikings. And the Vikings, I think, are a great story. I think what Sam Darnold has done is tremendous. I was always a bit of a Sam Darnold believer. I liked him coming out of USC, and to see him kind of live up to expectations, even though it kind of took him a bit, is good for him. But I do think ultimately the Eagles um, are the better team than Minnesota, and I think that they have better players. And I think that if we had to play Minnesota in the NFC Championship, I think they'd win. So, um, and looking at the playoffs, I kind of want to transition into that. Um, as of right now, the wild card matchup for the Eagles, it's either going to be between the Commanders and the Packers. Teams that we've beaten this year, we probably would have swept the Commanders if Jalen Hurts didn't get hurt. So I do ultimately like the matchups there. Granted, I think Green Bay has, minus what happened last week against the Vikings, I think have played tremendous. I think Jordan Love late in the year, has really stepped up his game, sort of like what he did last year. I'm a big believer in him, but I also believe that if you get him rattled and you get him moving in the pocket and kind of bailing in the pocket early, he is prone to make mistakes. And then what the Eagles did against the Commanders defensively the last two games. Granted, they did lose a couple weeks ago, but I think a big portion of that was due to the field position battle, and I think Washington ultimately took advantage of that. But the Eagles have shown that they can slow down Jaden Daniels, and so I feel good about those matchups. If you were to ask me who would I want to play between the Commanders and Packers, I'd say the Commanders, especially when we're at full strength. I think we're the better team. Commanders are absolutely a force to be reckoned with going forward. They have a very bright future. I said it going into the season. I said it throughout the season. Jaden Daniels is the one guy that scares me the most in this league because we have to face him twice going forward. And what he's been able to do this year, in year one of his career, and what he's been able to do in the fourth quarter, it's really impressive. I mean, he's had a very impressive year, and you know, he's the guy that I worry about the most. But I do think, at least for this year, the Eagles have. I do think they have the Commanders' number. Obviously you can argue that the Commanders were able to beat them a couple weeks ago. Uh, but I think if you look at Jalen Hurts' his injury, I think that played a huge part. I think that game would have been over with sooner than later. The way that game was trending with Jalen Hurts in there. So, um, and the fact that we had Kenny Pickett in there, who didn't even play a snap all year, or barely played all year, uh, speaks volumes to like, hey, this team, even without their best quarterback, can go toe to toe with a good team in the Commanders. But at full strength, I think the Eagles are a better team and they'll handle business, and I think they'll beat them. So um, that's kind of where I'm at in terms of who I want to play in the wild card round. Now, I don't know if you guys care, but the Pro Bowl rosters were announced. Again, you got to take it with a grain of salt, but this is the initial list, which I think does kind of matter. As opposed to when these games happen, you'll probably have like 3-4 alternates for each position, but it is kind of like a rough outline of what the All Pro team will look like. And the Eagles have 6 players in. Obviously, Saquon was a no-brainer for the Pro Bowl. Lane Johnson, Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens, Zach Bond all made it as well as Jalen Carter. I don't really have anything there's nothing really to complain about in terms of snubs. I do think you could make an argument for Kenyon Mitchell in there. I do think that he had a good year, or not a good year. I thought he had a great year, though. He did kind of come down to earth, uh, in the last couple games a bit, but he's just been spectacular all season long. And I think that, he's been one of the more impressive rookies I've ever seen. The impact that he's had on this defense, the fact that you can basically lock down your side of the field and do it as a rookie is very impressive. I would have given him the nod. You could also argue AJ. Obviously, AJ's even with missing a couple games, he still is well over 1,000 yards. Um, but the guys in front of him, Justin Jefferson, obviously is one of the best receivers in the NFL. Amon-Ra St. Brown has had a tremendous year. CeeDee Lamb, again, another great year for him. You could argue over Scary Terry, but Scary Terry does have more touchdowns than AJ. So you could have fit maybe AJ and Kenyon in, but other than that, I really don't have any complaints about it. Jared Goff, Jaden Daniels, and Sam Darnold, your quarterbacks. I have no problem with that. Um, so I don't, even though the Jalen Hurts, despite what some will say, I did think had a good year overall. Obviously won a shit ton of games, and I think that needs to be accounted for. But yeah, I don't really have, there's not like, oh my God, this person didn't get in. I mean, and if you look at the quarterbacks, Jalen Johnson is one of the best quarterbacks. Byron Murphy, J.C. Horn, obviously the Panthers, no one really paid attention to them as much, but J.C. Horn is a very good player, and Devin Witherspoon of the Seahawks is incredible. So, um, it's not the end of the world. I think the guys that made the Pro Bowl absolutely should have made it. So I'm glad that they got in. So that's going to cover the Eagles. I want to talk about the college football playoff. Um, yeah, it was interesting. Obviously we had the game in New Orleans, the Sugar Bowl game between Notre Dame and Georgia postponed due to the horrific terrorist attack in New Orleans, which is very unfortunate. And my thoughts and prayers go out to those affected. But they will play today at 4 p.m. Very interested about that game. So Penn State takes care of business against Boise State. I mean, what is there to say? I'm not a Penn State fan, as you guys know. To me, I think it's shameful that they got such a cakewalk. I mean, they're playing tomato cans in SMU and Boise State. I mean, they just, you know, what if they had to play Oregon, in the second round, or what if they had to play somebody like a Notre Dame? To me, I just think that their path to the playoff is an absolute joke. And I really hope and pray whoever wins between Georgia and Notre Dame spanks their ass, because I'm not necessarily sold on Penn State. I don't think that they are as good as their success in the playoff has suggested, put it to you that way. I personally think if they played a team like Michigan, that game would be that would be a close game, and that'd be an interesting game, especially if Michigan had um, all their guys like Loveland and Kenneth Graham or excuse me, Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham and Will Johnson and those guys factored into to what Michigan has now. Yeah, I think that would have been a very close game, but obviously that wasn't meant to be, and Michigan didn't make the playoff. But it just shows you that a team like Michigan would have put up a significant amount of resistance compared to SMU and Boise State. I mean, what are we talking about here? I mean, it's just an absolute joke. But they're taking advantage of who they got to play or who they play, and now they're in the Orange Bowl in the semifinals. So kudos to them. But it just shows you how flawed the playoff system is, and hopefully they fix that. I mean, personally, I wouldn't mind if Penn State got a bye, but I would have liked to see. I mean, what if they played Texas? It would do it, or I mean, I would have put Texas in the bye, but let's just say they're the 4 seed and they had and Ohio State was like a 5, or um, Notre Dame was a 5 seed. Like I would be very curious to see how they would have favored against them in the second round, as opposed to just going through tomato cans like they're going through. But they'll have their work cut out for them against Georgia and Notre Dame. Make no mistake about it. But credit to them. Um they're taking care of business now. A lot of people are like, "Oh, well, look at James Franklin. Look, he can win big games now." I mean, again, it's SMU and Boise State. Let's see what he does against Blue Bloods in Georgia or Notre Dame. So curious to see what happens there. Texas wins a thriller against Arizona State. A lot's been said about the targeting, or the missed targeting call, which would have ultimately set up Arizona State to kick a game-winning field goal. Um, could have called it. I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I mean, it's these targeting calls are kind of iffy at times. It was a football play. In terms of the guy wasn't necessarily trying to lean with his head, but the way his momentum carried him to the ball carrier. Obviously, his head was hit first, so you could have called it. I would have swallowed the whistle, so I don't necessarily have a problem with that. And then obviously it went to double overtime, and Quinn Ewers, who has been a mixed bag recently, it was a mixed bag in the game. On fourth down, finally pulled through for the Longhorns, and they ultimately got the W after that. They tied the game, and then they scored immediately in their second possession, went for 2, got it, and got the pick to seal Arizona State's fate, and then um, have moved on to the Cotton Bowl world, in which they will play the Ohio State Buckeyes, who, listen, I hate giving them credit, but shit, man, when you bludgeon Tennessee and you bludgeon Oregon the way that you did, credit where credit's due. I still, um, I still think Michigan lives rent free in their head. I still think Michigan owns Ryan Day, but they might win it all this year, and it's going to be hard to watch. Because they look like they're the best team in the country. What they did to Oregon, I mean, Oregon had no answers. What Ryan Day and Chip Kelly did against Dan Lanning and that Oregon team was very impressive. I mean, Jeremiah Smith is an absolute tank. Um, he's going to be tough to deal with for the next 2 years for Michigan. And Will Howard has stepped up in a big way. He had a dreadful game against Michigan, but he's answered the bell. And you got to give credit where credit is due. I hate doing it. I absolutely hate the Buckeyes with every fiber of my being, but they absolutely look like the best team in the country. So, yeah, man, credit to them. Uh, they look like they're going to win it all. Um, you know, maybe Texas um, can play a complete game against them, sort of like they did against Michigan early on in the year. Um, but I see Ohio State kind of run away with this thing. I hate admitting that, but that's where it's heading. I mean, they look impressive, and credit to them. I thought they were going to lose to Tennessee. I thought that Michigan loss was going to uh, hurt them in the end, but it might end up being the best thing that's happened to them, at least for this year. So yeah, we it looks like Ohio State uh, might end up winning a national championship when it's all said and done. And, ugh, I hate saying it, but you got to give credit where it's due, and they've answered the bell since that loss. So uh, there you have it. There. I don't want to give too much credit because I absolutely despise them, but it is what it is. And then as far as today's game is concerned between Notre Dame and Georgia, this is one of the games I don't really have the best read on. Notre Dame is favored by 1 point. I totally get that. They have a ton of momentum going into this game. Despite that ugly loss to Northern Illinois, they've kind of ran away with their season, so to speak. They've kind of run the table, excuse me, I should say, with their season and took care of business. Georgia's interesting, with Carson Beck being hurt. I think that will ultimately hurt them, and but at the same time, I look at their schedules, and I mean, Georgia's the most battle tested team in the entire country. I mean, they have gone through the murderer's row of college football. I mean, look at their schedule. I mean, look at this. I mean, it's say what you want about them, uh, but at the same time, I mean, they beat Clemson, who was ranked, Alabama, who was ranked, Texas, who was ranked twice. They obviously lost to Ole Miss. Or I said they did. I say they no, they lost to Alabama. My apologies. I don't know if I said they beat them, but they lost to Alabama. So they had to play. They had to play Clemson, who they beat, who was ranked. Alabama, who they beat at Alabama, which they lost. Um, they beat Texas at Texas, and then they beat them in the SEC championship. So they beat them twice. And then they lost to Ole Miss at Ole Miss. And then they beat Tennessee. So they've had to go through the murderer's row. It would not shock me if they pulled off the upset. Um, but to me, I just think without Carson Beck, I think it's a little bit too over. It's going to be a little hard for them to overcome that, to be honest with you. But it wouldn't shock me. But Notre Dame, I think has looked very impressive since the loss to Northern Illinois. If you look at their schedule, like I said, I mean, it's really like a tale. I mean, Navy. I mean, they have Louisville, Navy, and Army. I mean, that's nowhere near the competition that Georgia's going up against. But credit to them, they've answered the bell since they did. They also did beat Texas A&M early on in the year, but they do have, to me, the players. I do think Riley Leonard can get them over the hump. So I am picking Notre Dame to win. If they can kind of play ball control and keep Georgia off the field and kind of do what they do best, I think Notre Dame will pull this out. So yeah, that's pretty much going to cover the college football playoff. As far as Michigan is concerned, because I want to hit on that. What a great way to end the season. It was not the season I wanted. Um, obviously it was a disappointing year, despite winning a national championship last year. But when you don't have great quarterback play, there's only so much you can do. But the way they ended the season, getting the number one recruit in Bryce Underwood, beating Ohio State, the number two team in the country at the time in Columbus, and then beating an Alabama team, the number 11th ranked Alabama team, who a lot of people thought should have been in the playoff, is impressive. And they have a shit ton of momentum going into next year. And I feel really good about next year. I think Michigan will be back. I think Michigan will be in the college football playoff. And Bryce Underwood's going to take this offense and this team to a whole different level. I know they're losing a handful of guys defensively, but Michigan always replenishes the well as far as their defense is concerned. I thought what Wink Martindale did the last two games is incredible. That's why we're paying him $2 to $3 million a year. And I feel good about this team going forward. Despite the losses on defense, I think that they're going to replenish the well because a guy like Wink Martindale will put guys in the best positions to succeed. And I feel good about Sharon Moore, who I had my doubts about. I think that he gets the memo, and he gets that. You can't rest on your laurels of winning a national championship, and you can't rest on your laurels in terms of player development. Now, player development is huge, but you also need to have premium players. You need to go out now that the NIL is a thing and the transfer portal is a thing. You need to utilize those resources to your advantage, and they did that with Bryce Underwood. Hopefully, they can get some more guys, especially receivers. Maybe Zachariah Branch can come. I'm not 100% sure if he uh, decided to sign with the team yet. I just want to make sure that he's still available. Uh, yeah, he's still out there. He's going to be in the transfer portal. Um, it looks like he's meeting with Miami. Him and his brother Zion are meeting with Miami. So that should be interesting. Hopefully Michigan can throw some money at him because that's a guy I think who can help this offense and add some juice to spread some things out in terms of the running game and what they like to do. But they need to elevate their passing game. Passing game, obviously, that's why they fired Kirk Campbell. And hopefully Bryce Underwood is everything that we hope he is. And I think that Michigan will be back. Just add some more pieces to the outside at wide receiver, and I think we'll be fine. I really like this team, and they have a shit ton of momentum going into 2025. So I think Michigan is going to be back next year. So that's going to cover college football. And before I talk about the Sixers, I want to let you guys know about our sponsor, Warlord Beard Oil. If you go to warlordbeardoil.com and use the promo code Old Sports, you get 15% off all your beard products, and any order over $65 will get you free shipping. So you go to you go to warlordbeardoil.com, put in that promo code Old Sports, get 15% off all your beard products, and any order over $65 will get you free shipping. So let's talk about the Sixers. Prior to last night, they won 4 straight. They obviously had a huge win on Christmas Day, which kind of got people excited again, when given what Embiid and Maxey did. And you kind of felt better about this team. And then last night they're up by 9 points with 3:34 left, and uh, the Kings go on a 15-0 run, and they ultimately blow the game. Not great. Granted, they were without Embiid, but Paul George put up 30. Maxey was also productive. You should be able to win a game against the Kings, even despite being without Joel Embiid. So yeah, a little disheartening. But here's where I am with this team. Do I think that this team can make the playoffs? And do I think that they can at least compete? Could they possibly? I know they've dug themselves a hole early on in the season with all the chaos and injuries. Could I see them maybe getting a 6, maybe 5 seed going to the playoffs and Embiid and Maxey playing the way that they're playing? Get them to that point? Yeah, I do. Do I think that they can be in the mix with Maxey and Embiid playing at the level that we know that they can play? I do. I think it's sort of business as usual going forward, but that's not the goal. The goal is to win a championship. And 2 things need to happen for this team to legitimately compete for a championship. Is if Paul George can stay healthy, that's number 1. If he can stay healthy and produce like the guy that we paid for, like we know that he can play, um, to take over the spot of Tobias Harris and not even necessarily take over your third guy, right? Like you, you want him to be your third guy, but he also has the ability to be your second guy on any given night. If Maxey has a down game or, you know, he has the ability to on some nights be better than Maxey. So you have a guy that can do that when healthy in Paul George, and the key is to stay healthy. So if he can continue to stay healthy and produce, I think that's going to help out a lot. And if Jarrett McCain can come back, that's the second one. And continue to develop like he was developing. And keep in mind too, he hasn't played a lot with the big three in Embiid, Maxey, and George. And to see him kind of gel with those guys and bring in a dynamic like he brings, especially from three, that will give you an opportunity to compete. I think right here, right now, I can't definitively say that the Sixers are back in terms of can they win a championship. I'm not quite there yet. Um, but I do think that if Paul George can stay healthy and produce, and if Jarrett McCain can come back and continue to grow and develop throughout, his first year in the NBA, I think that this team can compete for a championship. Uh, no, but again, a lot of things have to happen. That's contingent on if Joel can stay healthy as well as Maxey. But if what we got on Christmas Day from Joel and Tyrese uh, is what we're going to see throughout the end of till the end of the year, I feel better about this team. I think that this team can be in the mix, but if they want to win a championship, Paul George needs to stay healthy and produce, and to solidify that third guy spot, and sometimes be that too. And Jarrett McCain needs to come back and play like he was playing, and give give these guys, the big three, a bit of a break at times, and add that dynamic of 3-point shooting that this team needs for the playoffs. So I feel a little bit better about the Sixers, but I'm not quite there to say, okay, they're back and they're going to compete for a championship. Some things have to happen, and Joel needs to stay healthy. Period. End of story. If he stays healthy and he plays the way he played on Christmas Day, I think we got something there, but we shall see. That's going to do it today. Again, Happy New Year to everybody. I hope everybody achieves all their goals for 2025. And I really look forward to the new year. There's a lot of good things ahead. Obviously, we have the NFL playoffs, the college football playoffs, the semifinals will take place next week. And yeah, I feel really good. The Sixers have some momentum. The Flyers, I didn't really get into. They've kind of been up and down. Sooner than later, we will get to spring training, which I look forward to. So a lot of good things on the horizon. A lot of good things to discuss, and I really look forward to this year. But until next time,